man, I don't even know if I want to share this one. Today we're talking about how I called 911 for a hypoglycemia event or low blood sugar as somebody living with type 1 diabetes. Now the issue is that I actually didn't make the call because I was unable to. Now today, got a story for you that's going to shock you. If you stay till the end, I'll tell you about a really interesting interaction I had with the local firefighters and of course the story behind it, so that ideally you can learn from my mistake and avoid situations like this in the future yourselves. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Van de Vecht. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist living with type 1 diabetes. This whole event, this low that, as somebody who hasn't had a low blood sugar in over 8 months, this really caught me by surprise, if I'm being honest. Came on the back end of me going through my first ever Olympic distance triathlon. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's because of the triathlon. No, I mean, it's part of it, but there's actually something else that you're going to be shocked to find out about. And I hope helps you to avoid situations like this in your future as well. So we got a theme song for you, and then we're going to jump into today's crazy story. Let's dive in.
I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Van de Vecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Pardon My Pancreas.
2 days after completing this Olympic distance triathlon that I decided impulsively to go and register for, which by itself went amazing. And I still need to do a breakdown video for you guys on the strategies, the blood sugars, how did I do it? Because I think that a lot of people would benefit from understanding endurance-based exercise, glycemic index, and burn rates, and all these different things. But there was no urgent low on the day of the event. In fact, the next day, there wasn't any urgent lows either. Everything seemed relatively consistent with what I had been training for. But this 2 days later event caught me by surprise. And part of it is because I thought that I had gone in the clear. But no, what ultimately had happened, Tuesdays are interesting for me, where my wife goes to work and my mom actually grabs my daughter, takes her for the day, and I work by myself. And so I get to have the whole office and just a lot of quiet. And it's usually pretty peaceful. It gives me an opportunity to work out and all that. And my mom had come to pick up my daughter in the morning, and I was eating breakfast after I'd got my daughter all ready to go. And for anybody who doesn't know, she's 19 months old and amazing. I'm not going to say perfect, but she's amazing. She's incredible. Anyways, got her ready. My mom is loading her up in the car, and they're about to take off. And as I'm eating, and I pre-bolus, I took my insulin. It'd been like 5 or 10 minutes since my pre-bolus, so I wasn't eating just yet. But something felt off. Something felt different. And I glanced at my blood sugars, and I saw something that spooked me a little bit. And what I had noticed is that my blood sugars had gone from, I believe it was about 120, somewhere in there, to 96 in 5 minutes. And while that's nothing to be horrendously alarmed by, right? 96 is still a good blood sugar number. Contextually, I had just given a big bolus of insulin for a large breakfast, and my blood sugars had dropped like 25 points. That's pretty big, right? In 5 minutes. Now, if that were to continue as a trend, that would mean what, like triple arrows down? So it's something to keep an eye on at the very least. So I thought, you know what? I'm by myself. I might as well just have part of my breakfast. Worst case, if this is a CGM error and it's going to go back to 120, sometimes you get compression lows or whatever, I'll end up a little bit high and I can clean the house, right? Activity can help with bringing blood sugars down. And so I thought, I'll eat a couple bites. I ate a couple bites, watched the CGM, expected it to jump back up. Like, okay, it's probably just going to stabilize again, No, it continued to drop, just by a little bit this time, but into the 80s. And I'm like, that's a little bit weird, right? So I grabbed my glucometer and I did a finger stick to double check, like any responsible person, right? And I did a quick finger stick, and it was, in fact, in the low 80s. It was actually lower than what my CGM was reading. I was like, I don't love that, right? I'm currently pre-bolusing. and currently dropping, which means that the insulin I had just given, here's the context, had not started working yet, right? If you're a type 1 like me, you know that most of us take insulin before we eat. It's generally recommended that we do what's called a pre-bolus. You take your insulin early so that it has a chance to start working, and when it does, you introduce food, you have your meal, and it ideally pairs up perfectly so blood sugars are stable, right, after a meal. So that was the goal, but I was already dropping at a relatively rapid rate before my bolus had hit. So that's one of the first mistakes, not even mistakes, just observations I want you to understand today, is that this drop was not necessarily my bolus insulin. I was already dropping as I had given my breakfast bolus, which meant that if that drop were to continue in addition to my breakfast bolus hitting, I would likely see a much more rapid pace of decline in my blood sugars, right? I would likely be heading towards an urgent low. So in that moment, I sat there in my chair, kind of getting a little nervous, right? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if my mom's still here. So I called my mom. I was like, hey, Mom, are you still here or did you already take off? And she was like, oh, I'm still here. I'm just getting your daughter, getting Brooklyn into her car seat. And I was like, do you mind coming back in for like 5 or 10 minutes? Like just hang out for a sec. Something feels weird about this breakfast bolus. And I just feel better if you were here, so I'm not by myself. And she was like, sure. And for anybody who doesn't know my past, I've had a few really, really scary low blood sugars that said bluntly could have been my end. And so I've got a little bit of nerves surrounding urgent lows. And that's in addition to any other nerves that we typically have surrounding lows, because lows just aren't fun, right? So I call her in and she's hanging out and she's like, are you okay? And I was like, I think so. It's really weird. It's not acting how it typically does. I'm dropping before I even have insulin hitting me. She's like, okay, I'll hang out for a sec. She made a joke that Brooklyn did not want to come back inside because she loves hanging out with her nanny, which is my mom. So my daughter was like, no, I want to go back and play with you. Anyways, within 5 minutes, blood sugars continued to drop. And so I smashed my whole breakfast, right? I just ate everything, which for me is, and that day it was multiple prunes. It was a couple pieces of toast with peanut butter. It was a protein shake. I eat a lot of food typically. That's just normal for me. But nothing had happened. The blood sugars didn't stop dropping. And so I thought to myself, well, this is time for a potentially aggressive approach, but I am not going to let this blood sugar sink down and put me into an urgent low. I'm just going to drink a juice box, which for me is 20 grams of carbs. And I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. I can't believe that I'm drinking a juice box with breakfast. I'm not even low yet technically, but the trend of what's happening tells me that there's a risk, and I'd rather reduce that risk, even if it means going high, because I'm going to be alone for the rest of the day, right? This is just what's going through my head. I'm walking you guys through it. In fact, if you've ever had an urgent low or just even a scary low or a scary drop in general, comment the word HYPO, HYPO, if you're on YouTube with me. I just want to see who else has had a moment like this where you're like, oh, shoot, right? So comment HYPO if you have experienced either a bad low or a scary low in any capacity. I'd love to see that. And if you're feeling brave, just type out the story. I know a lot of people find a lot of comfort knowing that they're not the only ones that have scary lows, right? Or at the very least, you get to see that you're not the only one going low, that you're not the only person that has a hard time with blood sugars, right? So if you're feeling brave, comment the story. And if you're not feeling brave, just comment the word HYPO. Would love to see how many people we can get in the comments just to show support of everybody else too. And we all feel validated as well. Anyways, I have the whole juice box and another 5 minutes pass at finger stick 57. Like crap. This is not going well. Keep in mind, we're still under 20 minutes. And the reason that's important is that this is when my bolus insulin should start to hit, which is a large dose, right? So at this point, I'm like, whatever the heck is happening, it's about to get way worse, right? So I start grasping for my glucometer. I want to do some more double checks. And I'm like thinking through what just happened, what action needs to be taken, right? Trying to analyze a situation without panicking, because when you panic, it's very difficult to use the logic side of your brain to analyze. So I'm trying to slow the thoughts down, focus on what needs to happen next, right? And out of nowhere, I get shaky, sweaty, and the room starts to fade to white, right? I start to lose my vision. And in that moment, I knew it was a bad one. And I looked in the general direction of my mom, and I said, call 911. That is something that I have never said to her, ever. She's never heard me say those words. And she didn't hesitate. She called them. I heard them on speaker. I told her, oh, you know what? I left out a critical part of the story. We're out of juice boxes. I had searched for juice boxes while I was on the phone with her. And I said, I can't find any juice boxes. This kind of feels like a weird one. Remember, before it was bad, I was like, I should probably have a juice box nearby just in case. And that's why I had called her too. I was like, I need you to come inside because I think I'm about to go low, but I don't have juice boxes. I don't know what the heck happened. And I told her as she came in that there were juice boxes in my backpack. It's like the last emergency stash. You know, I've always got at least a couple in there. So she brought back juice boxes, and I don't fully remember this. I vaguely remember it, but she had shoved the juice box in my face, and apparently I chugged it. No questions asked, gone. So now we're 40 carbs up from juice in addition to my breakfast, and I'm losing my vision. The table is getting just covered in sweat. You know, I put my head down because I had no energy, and I was just fading fast. Got very nervous, and I told her, I was like, call 911. This is a serious thing. And you know, she told me to have a seat on the floor, and I laid down on the floor because I had zero energy. For anybody who's been in that situation or experienced a bad low, you know your body just feels like a shell, right? Like there's nothing inside. And that's exactly how I described it to her. It was like, I feel like my being just left. I feel like a shell of a human. There's nothing inside right now. That I am not a person. I am somebody who has no sugar left in their body. Anyways, long story short, we keep an eye on the blood sugars. They're still going down, you know, dropping at a very rapid rate. I stopped testing on the glucometer because I had no strength left to do so. And this low snuck up on me so fast that this entire story that I've given you so far has happened in the spread of like 15 to maybe 20 minutes. And that rapid decline in blood sugars led me to determine it was an emergency situation where I had her call. And then about 5 to 10 minutes later, I'm guessing, I don't fully know because I wasn't super alert, super aware of the situation, just focusing on not losing consciousness. And I told her to cancel it because I watched the blood sugars started to level out, and you know, it started to come back up. And she actually had asked me a question. She was like, fully support your decision in doing this, but what is it that you're expecting them to do when they get here? And I had that thought, and I was like, yeah, it's a good point, right? Like, I have glucagon in my backpack. She doesn't know how to use it yet. Well, it's pretty simple, but we actually watched the YouTube video that I made on how to use it afterwards. And so if you haven't checked that out, I'll link that up in the description so you can go watch how to use glucagon, because that is critical knowledge to have. But she was like, what do you expect them to do that we're not already doing? And I was like, that's a good point, right? And so in my cloudy thought process, I was like, okay, cancel the call. And she was like, are you sure? You look pretty messed up. And she had told me, she's like, you look pale, you're sweaty, like there's no color to your face. Like you look rough. I was like, I think it's coming back too, though. My blood sugars are coming back up. And they did, thankfully, they did. And what was interesting about this is that, as I said, cancel the call, she called in, said, hey, we're canceling. He's responding to the sugar now. We heard the sirens of the fire truck, and I'm laying on the floor, and from where I was laying in the kitchen, I can see straight through our front door. And because she rushed back in, she didn't close the door. It was just a screen that was there. And so through the screen door, I just very faintly tried to salute the fire truck. And I don't know if this is true or not. I swear I saw it, though. One of them was waving at me. Probably not, because that wouldn't be super professional of them. But I tried to wave at them through the door, and they drove right by, turned their sirens off, and continued on with their day. So what an experience, right? And I want to break down quickly a few of the thoughts that I had surrounding this. So number one, Lows happen, and they will continue to happen until diabetes is cured, right? I haven't had a low blood sugar in over 8 months. That is insane. Absolutely insane, right? What's incredible about this, though, is the strategies that were involved in avoiding the lows were very intentional, but the experience of the low showed me that, once again, the episode that I did on the 5% rule remains true. 95% of diabetes we can control, right? 5% though, out of our hands. There are things that you have no control over and inevitably will cause fluctuations in blood sugars. Sometimes scary fluctuations, right? So understanding that, I was able to assess this, and my first thought behind this, just being completely transparent with you, was a bit of a trauma response. And I told you in the beginning of this episode, there were times in my life where I came very close to not making it from low blood sugars, some hypoglycemic events in different countries or different activities. And it's just a little scary thinking over what could have been, right? But then I thought about it in a different perspective. I thought, what if this is what was expected? What if diabetes was just a series of low blood sugars that were never ending, and it's just a matter of how far in between we have them? And I thought, you know what? We get to assign the meaning to life's events that we choose. So I can choose to see this as a traumatic event where I almost died, and holy cow, I hope that never happens again, and I'll never know, oh my gosh, uncertainty, right? Or I can choose to label it as a low and look at the facts. So I thought, you know what? Why would I label this as traumatic in my mind if it doesn't serve the outcome that I desire? And the outcome that I desire is quality of life, bravery, living my life, right? And if I assign trauma to this event, it will impede me from living my life to the fullest. Because if I see that those low blood sugars are unpredictable and they can come out of nowhere and snatch you away, then I'm less likely to experience the joy that life has to offer. So I chose to not ignore the event, but to relabel the event, not as trauma, but as a learning experience. And so in that, I pulled apart the pieces of what happened, why did it happen. There's a lot of analysis that goes on in my head. That's just how I think. This is what makes me the coach that I am for other type 1s, where I love analyzing blood sugars, trends, patterns, predictions, formulas. Like, that's what I do best. And so I put my analyzer hat on, and ultimately it boiled down to a few different pieces that I believe impacted this blood sugar. One is a delayed onset of insulin sensitivity. So I had my triathlon 2 days prior. The day after the triathlon, I jumped straight back into working out. I'm a little bit crazy like that. I think that's fair to say. Full weightlifting. Now, weightlifting specifically has a slightly different impact on blood sugars and insulin sensitivity than does a run or a walk or going through a theme park, right? So I believe that what I had done between the combination of those 2 days had essentially supercharged my insulin sensitivity for the second day, right? In addition to that, I also stopped training for the triathlon specifically. And my triathlon workouts are very intense. They were smushed together. I only had 3 weeks to train for this second one that I was in. And as a result, I believe that the stress that I had put on my body had left me in a constant state of cycling cortisol and inflammation surrounding my joints, my muscle tissue, and I wasn't ever fully recovering because I just haven't been sleeping great, right? So in finally taking a break, I believe that the lower inflammation and lower cortisol likely had an impact also on blood sugars running a little lower on average, which holds true because the rest of the week, I did notice that I was seeing consistent lower blood sugars and a few other lows. So in the last week, I've had more low blood sugars than I have in the last year, which is insane to think about on both sides of the equation. All that to say, in the last week, I have also lost 5 pounds, which is crazy. And actually, we're doing a whole workshop on weight loss with type 1. There's a right and a wrong way to do it. And I simply made a single error in my process. I forgot that this is what kills me. You can know everything about type 1, but if you forget something, forget it. Like it doesn't work, you know? Human error will always be part of the equation. And in this case, I had overlooked a single step, and that is that weight also impacts our insulin needs and our blood sugar strategies, right? So these 5 pounds that I had dropped over the last 2 weeks probably ultimately came to all these different pieces: the weight loss, the insulin sensitivity peaking, the lower inflammation, lower cortisol. It just all created this perfect storm that hit me on a day where I should have been alone. And I praise God that my mom was still in the driveway getting my daughter in the car seat, because like I said, she stuffed a juice box in my face, and that was probably one of the reasons that I came back so quick, is that we had 40 grams of sugar coursing through my blood, through my system, and very grateful that she was still there. Quick cut in. Hey, you probably realize the audio and video are completely different. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I just remembered a key component to this entire story that I almost left out. There was a single piece, phrase really, that from the floor when I was still low, feeling the impact, that I had said to my mom that I think is critical for you to understand. The blood sugar formulas that we teach, yes, they're beneficial, they're cool, they're fantastic, right? We have the ability to predict where blood sugars are going to go. That's what we teach our clients. It's what I use myself. I realized in that moment that these blood sugar formulas are not only a benefit, but are a necessity. It's because I was able to predict where that blood sugar is going to go based on the surrounding factors, the context of that blood sugar, that I was able to catch it before it truly became an urgent situation where it would have been an emergency. I probably would have gone unconscious, and it would have gone downhill fast. It is because we are able to predict blood sugars that we can avoid potentially dangerous situations. It's not perfect, nothing in life is, but this gives us the best chance possible to give ourselves a head start when things like that go south. This is why when we first take on new clients, we teach them about the surrounding variables, the other factors. You heard me talk about the timing of my dose versus basal, the impact of the food. What I didn't cover was the glycemic index of my food, the macronutrient quantity. All these things are going through my head as I calculated what action needed to be taken. This is the kind of stuff that can save your life. It feels like it's just for a benefit. Oh, I would like to be able to predict stable blood sugars. And transparently, that's what I thought we were teaching as well. But I realized in that moment, lying on the floor, coming back to reality, where I almost had an emergency situation, that the blood sugar formulas were not only for benefit, but also a necessity for keeping me going. So I wanted to add that in there. Back to the episode. So in the description of this video, a couple resources for you guys. One, you gotta know how to use glucagon. If I were alone, that probably would have been the next choice for me, right? Because I was tanking with my blood sugars. It's scary. So I'll put that in the description so you understand how to use glucagon, whether it's a nasal spray, which is the newer ones like Baqsimi, or the ones that are outdated. I believe they're all expired and they stopped producing them now, but there used to be these red tubes that you could use. You'd have to mix the solution, and it was ridiculous. Made by Lilly at that point. But a couple other resources I'll put in the description for you as well. One is actually that I was mentioning the right and the wrong way to do weight loss, right? I did it the right way, but I forgot one step, which makes it the wrong way. As your weight fluctuates, whether you're seeing success or not, you can expect your blood sugar strategies to require adaptation, right? To change with your weight as it fluctuates, as different workouts are coming into play, as your dietary needs or strategies may change. Your blood sugars need to have a plan. You got to have something set up so you don't experience what I just did. Now, if weight loss specifically is one of your goals and you've been struggling with type 1 and weight loss, there's actually an extra step that's kind of hidden that most doctors, personal trainers, dietitians just don't know about because they don't understand the intricacies and nuances of type 1. So if weight loss is your goal, there's also a link in the description that I'll put in there for you for a workshop we're doing. That's going to be the end all of like everything you'll ever need to understand, plans, next steps, blood sugars, all that. So that's in the description as well. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to make sure I mentioned to you guys. So, oh yeah, second big piece to this. The juice box that my mom had so kindly shoved into my face, which I'm so grateful for, was almost, I think it was 8 or 9 months past the expiration date. And that's on me. That's 100% my fault. I think she had mentioned that, but again, I wasn't fully aware of my surroundings. So I went and checked, and most of my low snacks were expired by a lot. Some of them years. And it's because I packed things up and I set them in places like my backpack, my car, my bedroom, and the kitchen, my gym supplies. I've just got this stuff stashed everywhere, right? But I hadn't considered the expiration dates. So right now, what I want you to do is check your supplies. Make sure that you have supplies and low snacks and prescriptions that are up to date. This applies to glucagon, this applies to insulin, to pen needles, to test strips, to low snacks. For me, it was juice boxes. Make sure that you have everything up to date. That can really just throw a wrench in your plans when you actually need it. All right. So check your expiration dates. Last is the no low plan. So I've made a video on this in the past. I'll link that up as well in the description. You can just go through the description and click on all the stuff. Make sure you have everything you need. So the no low plan, I made a video on it, but a different side of the plan that's not mentioned in that video is the exchange rule. So what I also could have done if I was plummeting and I was halfway through my breakfast, part of my breakfast was toast with peanut butter on it. Now, what do we know about fats and proteins, which is what peanut butter is largely comprised of? Fats and proteins slow down digestion, right? Specifically fats, it actually delays the gastric emptying rates. So when we look at slowing down digestion with a rapid dropping blood glucose, I want to make sure that my blood sugars come back up as fast as humanly possible, which means I might have considered setting my toast aside and replacing it with a juice box, which sounds kind of depressing because you're like, I want the toast though. Like, I personally am obsessed with peanut butter. I literally eat peanut butter at every single meal. Every single meal I have peanut butter. There's a fun fact for you. I love it. So that's depressing to think about, but it could save your life, right? So understanding the exchange rule of finding something that has a similar carb count. And there's two benefits to this. One, it will impact your system faster if you're replacing fats and proteins with fast-acting carbs, right? Because you're doing two things. You're not delaying digestion and you're consuming a fast digesting option, right? So that would have probably saved me quite a bit of frustration and time on the floor. So the exchange system. But the other thing that you can consider with this is that after I finished this whole situation, and I dismissed my mom, I was like, okay, go to your workout, go about your day, do your thing. Once I cleared, I think 130, I was like, I think I can handle this now. So thank you so much, right? But once I cleared that, about an hour later, I saw a second spike when, the proteins and fats had released the rest of the juice and ended up skyrocketing. Right up past 200. It was expected, but frustrating as well. What I would save myself the hassle from is if I had exchanged the peanut butter toast for a juice box, I wouldn't have to worry about giving corrections later because the insulin given would have matched, right? So ultimately, it looks like the basal had been too significant. Something weird did happen. I do not have full certainty on it. I have a secondary thought that maybe the algorithm that I use had delivered some insulin right before I had breakfast that I was unaware of, and maybe that's what led into the rapid decline in blood glucose before my bolus of insulin hit. So that's part of it. I'm guessing, I'm not gonna say it's part of it. It could have potentially been part of the situation. But all that to say, my bolus seems to have been correct because I stopped at 130 and then an hour later, jumped to 200, ended up not having to cover about 2/3 of one of the juice boxes. So about half of the juice that I consumed was unnecessary in the end. But with it being an emergency situation, I'm okay with that, with over-treating just a little bit. So the exchange strategy can save you from having to dose extra later on, but it can also save you by allowing the foods or juices to be consumed and digested faster. So that's another thought I wanted to give you guys. Lastly, the reality and perspective check. So reality check, lows can happen, right? I would say that I've nearly mastered my blood sugars. I can manipulate blood sugars, insulin sensitivity. I literally teach a blood sugar formula method that allows us to predict where blood sugars are going to go through exercise, different meals, different schedules, like all these things. Blood sugars can be predictable. But with that 5% rule I talk about, where there's just things that are out of your control, you can't always have 100% time and range perfect at 83. You know, it's just not realistic, at least not while still living your life, having a higher quality of life. And so this reality check for me was, I mean, honestly, I believe it was God just kind of giving me a little humbling experience, because I kept talking about it. I haven't been low in 8 months. And he's like, there's a low, you know. But in this reality check, reminding me to be diligent, to be aware, to respect the monstrosity that this disease is and can bring. It's like, you know, I used to go surfing a lot, and there was this general culture among surfers that you respect the power of the ocean, right? The ocean seems peaceful and calm until you get knocked off your surfboard and washed around under the water, and you don't know which way is up, and you're gasping for air, and then another wave comes and pushes you back under, and it just feels like a losing battle. It's actually quite scary if you get caught up in that, or a riptide, any of those things. So understand that there is beauty in living day to day with a disease that could kill us, but we've found a way to survive and ideally thrive with diabetes. But the reality check is that it is still a very real risk to our health, to our safety, and it needs to be treated with respect. It needs to be controlled. We need to make this daily decision, which is why I tell you guys to keep up the fight. You don't just make one choice to start fighting and then it's like, oh yeah, it's all easy. Every day we wake up, we make a decision. I will or I will not keep up the fight. So, reality check. This is diabetes. It should not always be like this, but every once in a while, stars might align to where it creates this perfect storm, as it did for me, and just all heck breaks loose. I'm trying to keep PG for all the algorithms. So reality check and then perspective check. So in this perspective, I told you I chose whether or not I would assign trauma to this event in my life. Previously, yes, I would see it as a traumatic event because I had 911 called, right? And I wasn't even the one dialing because I was near passing out. Terrifying. However, I can also remove the terror, remove the trauma, if I so choose, and treat it as a learning experience where if this is what is expected, it's no longer traumatic, right? We think about the soreness that comes after a gym. You go get a really good workout in. If you don't expect to be sore the next day, and then you are sore, you suffer additionally to what is already being experienced. You know, people who do a bunch of squats and lunges and then can't walk the next day. If they were expecting it, they're like, yeah, I knew this was going to come. Oh my gosh, they're talking to their friends. You wouldn't believe it. I can't even stand up from going to the bathroom. This is ridiculous, right? But if you don't expect it, and if you've never experienced it before, that could be a nightmare. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with my legs? I can't move. I'm paralyzed. My body's shut down. I can't figure this out. I need to go to the hospital. Call 911, right? That would be a scary experience. Not being able to walk when yesterday you were totally fine. So understanding that we get to choose the labels that we place on life events, even the ones that seem traumatic. We can rewrite how we remember things and how we experience things on a day-to-day basis. So, I thought that might be helpful for you. This is how I am choosing to see this event. I was still nervous going back and giving another bolus, especially larger boluses. This entire last week has been an experiment. I told you a lot of different variables are shifting as my training schedules and weight and my intensity and my injuries. I actually did get injured in the triathlon, unfortunately, but all these things are shifting and I've had to adapt, right? And now I'm relearning my new ratios and setting up my pump to match my current reality. I've actually reduced a lot of my insulin to avoid those lows happening again. And that knowledge base I have forever, which I am truly grateful for. The research that I've done over the years allows me to pivot when diabetes throws me lemons, right? And that's what I hope for all of you as well. That's why I make these videos, to bring you these epiphanies, these aha moments where I'm like, wow, that was crazy. Here's what I learned, right? So if you found this one helpful, do let me know. Drop a comment, like it. If you're not subscribed yet, definitely do that. You're gonna wanna hear some of the next stories that I've got, because they keep getting crazier. And a funny one I'll tell you is that we have this physical newsletter that we send out every month. And I was thinking to myself last week, it's like, I've got this thing written and we send it out to their doorsteps, all of our clients and everything. Like, I'm missing a final story, like the main topic. Like, I just don't know what else to write about. And the day that happened was supposed to be the day that I had scheduled out a couple hours to just sit down and think of what was another good topic to include in this newsletter for the month. And I was like, I just don't know what I'm going to write about. Ask and you shall receive, right? Again, God was like, you want a story? All right, I'll give you a story. And so I ended up spending some time diving a level deeper, of course, into what went on, what happened, what my plans are, and a few other pieces that I think are going to be really helpful for all of our subscribers to that. And I'll put that in the description as well for you guys. The Renegade Warriors newsletter, super fun for me to share in-depth stuff that I can't really talk about on here, because we got the algorithms kind of searching for what could be considered dangerous, even though I vet all of my information. But what we talk about there is ultimately how to think differently about diabetes, about life, how to adapt and pivot and live your best life without blood sugars getting in the way, right? So let's see. Did I get everything in here? I wanted to cover a lot today, so I'm gonna make sure we're looking good. Yeah, I think we covered it all. So crazy story, but I'm not going to say it's crazy anymore because it's a learning lesson. And I hope this was a helpful learning lesson for you as well. Check your supplies, check yourself, your reality. How are you defining things in life? Do you have a no-low plan? Is there a backup plan for when something like that does happen? Do you have juice nearby, stashed in every corner of the house and at work and in your car, right? Be prepared. And ultimately, if you need help, ask for it. I was a lot bit hesitant. I did not want to ask for help from my mom. And on top of that, I did not want to tell my mom to call 911. To me, that was a hit to my pride, because in addition to going low for the first time in 8 months, she always tells me like, oh my gosh, you're so good at controlling your blood sugars. And now I'm like, oh no, call 911. I was a little bit embarrassed, but I gotta say, asking for help was the best thing I could have possibly done, because had she not been there, I might not have gotten that second juice box in my mouth. I might not have been able to make the call, and I might have been on the floor 10 hours later when my wife came home. Could have been a very different experience for everyone involved. So understand that it is okay, that it is encouraged to ask for help. And if you need help, let us know. I'm here to help. My team is here to help. The community is here to help. If you want to use the comments, please let us know if there is something you're struggling with. Odds are we probably have the resources for you in some capacity. On YouTube alone, we have, I think, like 400 or 500 videos you might not be aware of, right? And you probably don't have time to go search through all of them. So let us know what you need help with. Happy to help. And in fact, I got another video for you that I think you'll appreciate. So hit the subscribe button. And if you're on YouTube with us right now, you're gonna check out this video right after you click subscribe, and check that one out too. All right, I hope you found this one helpful. I'll catch you guys next time, and keep up the fight.